What is going on with LA basketball? The Lakers, the Clippers, both of them neck and neck in that fifth spot right now in the NBA season. Find out in the next edition of Sideline Sports Podcast.
Welcome to Sideline Sports Podcast. If you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast.
And we welcome you to episode number 95. That's right, 5 away from episode number 100. You got to expect that we're going to come up big once the big 100 comes up. I know Mark definitely has some ideas. We've got some great ideas coming up for you guys. But I'm Alex Naveja from Sideline Sports Podcast, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. The source of your SoCal sports news via Sideline Sports Media. You guys know the guy on the bottom screen, host of Center Locked, and of course my football, my NCAA football, my combat sports, and NBA insider, Mark Vargas himself. Mark, what's going on, man? I know things are popping right now with Center Locked.
Yeah, man, we just had a great episode with my former offensive coordinator in high school, current offensive coordinator, and associate head coach, Coach Jude Oliva. We got a big episode dropping tomorrow or Thursday, Thursday the 9th on the Center Lock show. It's going to be a little curveball, so, I know baseball season's done, but, I'm throwing a wicked curve right now. So, just everything ready, middle of football season. Great. Playoffs are approaching, and, for the teams that I know there's a couple teams around that the football season's ending. So, perfect time to start talking some basketball. I'm ready to go.
Well, I know a lot of people are going to be pretty rusty to try to hit that curveball, but you know what? I know the man to my left-hand side, he is very good at hitting the NBA curveballs, especially with the Lakers, now named the Sports Ethos site from Ethos Lakers himself, the co-host. He is J.C. De Leon. If you're a day one Sideline Sports podcaster, you know J.C. from day one. J.C., how's it going? And, it's been a while since we've seen you.
Yeah, man, things are going well. Glad to hear you're doing well with some of your new side gigs. Happy to be back on.
Always a pleasure to have you on, JC. Let's go straight to the business right now. Lakers, I don't think this is the type of season that any of us really expected. I mean, losing some games that they really should have won, maybe against OKC, losing 2 against them, and just struggling against below 500 teams. And when it comes down to the 500 teams, they can't even get the job done with some of these. Please, what is going on with the Lakers right now? What are you seeing so far in this season?
The most obvious thing, and it's kind of a strange thing to really kind of focus on, because on roster, even though this team is old, they still have the capability of playing really well. And so, the fix is a relatively simple one. It's really just effort. And Anthony Davis has touched on it in an interview where he's like, we can win these games if we want to. The 2 losses versus OKC you mentioned were nothing but effort. They had big leads in both of those games, let it slip away. They've had leads in other games, especially the first game against Boston, let that one slip away. It's kind of funny. Today, Kevin Love actually did an interview with Channing Frye talking about that 2016 team where LeBron defeated the Golden State Warriors. And Kevin Love talked about how that was a team that didn't really care about the regular season, and they just turned it on in the playoffs. And I'm worried that that's what's happening with this team. They just don't really have that luxury to be able to turn it off and on whenever they want. They've got to start winning some of these games because they need home court advantage. And I don't think anybody expected Golden State to be back the way they were. I think people thought Golden State would be good again. I don't think they expected them to be as dominant as they are now. And so, yeah, Lakers have a lot of work to do.
And, I know you said it, Alex, not a lot of people expected it, but a newly formed LeBron team, the history has been there. It takes time. Bron does not he kind of, for me, if I'm looking at it, Bron lets the pieces work itself out. knows where he can, where he has to go in, right? LeBron's not going to, put his whole deck of cards on the table right now. LeBron's going to see who he can count on, who's going to be there when it does matter. And, I read the same article today, and, it's one of those things where they will turn it on and they have the capability of turning it on, but are we going to be in the similar situation last year where we're playing in a play-in game and we're getting faced with a team that nobody thought was going to be good, the Phoenix Suns? Everybody thought that was going to be a 5, maybe a 6-game series, and we ended up getting eliminated in 5 or 6. So nobody expected that. One bad injury and there goes the whole series. So we don't want to play a Golden State. We don't want to play a Phoenix in the first round. If we want to talk about making a run, and what's gonna matter is if we start to play like J.C. said, defense, effort. Those two things are going to separate us from any type of team. Because if nobody has the size like us, nobody has the IQ like us, and if we can play good defense and we're playing basketball where just like last night, there's effort. When you bring that extra effort, you can see the energy on the court is just, Staples is rocking. You got, Westbrook going on a, Westbrook making a giant dunk. And then you got Malik Monk, who's, I think, is playing a similar role to Trevor Ariza back on Kobe's teams, where he's a glue piece that is playing, I think, better than most thought. And, people who have kind of paid attention, I still think Kendrick Nunn, and if he can come back in and throw an extra factor into it, that's somebody who can come off the bench where we need Bron to sit, and it's already been seen so far this season. Bron hasn't been on the court as much, and it's going to come down to where we're going to need to second half of the year before playoffs. And this is why it's important we win some of these games now where we can sit a Bron in April. You know what I mean? We can sit a Westbrook. AD, we all know how that can go. AD's, knock on wood, we want him to be a dominant Kill O'Neal down there, but sometimes he plays, like he's a little fragile. So we got to win the games now. But just like JC said, it's not like we're getting, we're getting embarrassed because the effort's not there, but we're not mismatched, with any team really out there. I mean, Golden State, we all know Golden State's going to be, if that's how they're playing, if Steph's playing out of his mind, it's going to be hard to go beat them. How many times as Laker fans have we seen, us be in a good game, but, Dame makes three-pointers in the last, 5 minutes of the game, and, good defense, or you got Steph making some phenomenal stuff, and Golden State might get even better with the emergence of Klay Thompson. So,
yeah,
we don't know what it's going to look like. Klay can come back, not Klay, Kawhi can come back for the Clippers, and we'll get into that later. But Kawhi comes back. PG's playing probably some of his best basketball since he's been in LA, so that can be scary as well. That's just the Western Conference. You don't even want to look at the East. We all know what's on the other side. Whether it's Milwaukee, whether it's Brooklyn, there's a lot of different things that can happen. So just got effort. That's the main thing. As long as we can see the effort pre-All-Star break, I think we'll be, in a good standing across Laker Nation.
Yeah, and I think last night's game is a good example. Like, aside from Kendrick Nunn and maybe Trevor Ariza, the Lakers haven't been healthy, but last night's win versus Boston is a really good win. And it's now this is a time where people should really start to focus on how the Lakers perform, because with the exception of Ariza and Nunn, like, this is the roster. They don't have a lot of moves they can make in the trading deadline. Everyone's healthy-ish for now. Anthony Davis has to play a lot better. He's sort of been adjusting to kind of that new mass that he put on. He doesn't move as quickly as he used to, even though he's a little more durable with that extra muscle. It doesn't seem like he's really used to it, but he's got to step up to the plate and play a little better as well.
Hey, Charles Barkley called him out the other night. I think that's true. I mean, we're only going to go as far as we have Bron, we have Westbrook, all these Melo, who's also playing phenomenal, I think, a bit better than most thought he would. If AD is not the best player on the court, I don't think we're making any type of run, because AD is going to be the thing that separates us from any other team out there, because nobody else has an AD that can do what he does on the court with the supporting cast that we have. You know, you might say, well, Joker with Denver, but I take our supporting cast over that any day of the week, you know?
Yeah.
No doubt. I think the only team that really can even come close to maybe is Phoenix with DeAndre Ayton and the way he was playing in the postseason. So that's maybe the only guy that comes even close. But I really like what you guys said. It comes down to the defense. Go back to the Lakers-Clippers game, the first game of the season, the first time that these two, it's a battle of the LAs. The one thing I noticed, Lakers kept keeping it close. They were down 4-5, and they would come back, but they lacked the defensive stops. You saw it was just no stops at all. It was the Clippers going in, taking their long shots, the threes, making them, getting clutch 3-point shots to finish up the game. With the Lakers, I get it. Right now, we all know it's a very old team, but the Lakers don't have a chance if they try to go with another play-in. We can't have deja vu all over again with last year and them they start from the bottom and try to jump all the way to the top and try to keep up with Golden State and try to keep up with Utah with the 2 seed. You just can't do it. And what I see a lot of times too for the Lakers is they're trying to play like a young team. Well, you're not a young team anymore. There's a lot of young teams here in the Western Conference, and they're trying to play like them. Well, no, you can't play like them because you don't have that young team anymore. Play like a veteran team with a lot of experience that you're going to be able to get stops. And I do agree with what you said too, Mark. It's going to be all up to Davis to really try to carry this team, have to score points, and he was really nowhere to be found last night against Boston. Can't really have too many games like that because there's not a lot of dominant power forwards or even centers like Davis in the game. There's not a lot of guys out there. So if you really want to make a run this year, you guys kept it simple. Effort, stops. You win the game because offensively, Lakers always figure it out.
Yeah. Offense hasn't really been a problem for them this year. I mean, I know they at times rely on the 3-point shot a little bit too much, and they settle for jumpers. But I mean, LeBron, I think at this point he does kind of have a little bit of an excuse to sort of save himself for the playoffs. I think once the playoffs come, then you'll start to see him dominate more. You'll start to see him drive a little bit more. He doesn't really need to do that now. He does need to kind of let the pieces figure out how to play with each other. And yeah, so far, I mean, we could talk about the pieces. Malik Monk, as Mark said, has been playing really well. A little disappointed in Kent Bazemore. I thought based on his preseason, he'd be a little bit more of a defensive presence, and he hasn't really been. Wayne Ellington, since he's been back, he's been playing really well. Rondo, in his few minutes, whenever he plays, he takes control of the offense. He seems to settle everything down. The center position, I think, is a little wishy-washy with DeAndre Jordan and Dwight Howard because at the beginning of the season, even though a lot of people were saying DeAndre Jordan was playing really terrible defensively, I thought offensively he was handling his own, and I thought he was playing okay defensively. But as of late, Dwight Howard has been playing really well. He's been playing with that effort that he had that championship season, a couple of seasons with the Lakers. And so, yeah, I think some of the pieces still have a little bit of ways to go, including like Russell Westbrook himself. But yeah, I think the team is just now starting to get it together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to look at, a lot of people want to call out Vogel, and he does deserve some of the flack. Is he has to figure out what's going to work for this team, and there's times where, everybody was asking for DeAndre Jordan to get pulled. I mean, basically since the get-go, but it's one of those things that I think like Rondo, absolutely. Every time you see Rondo on the court, maybe at times defensively he can be a liability, but when you need 4 minutes, 5 minutes in a playoff situation, that's where our must-win game, that's right there is going to help you out. And I think THT has to get really back into playing shape. He missed the first couple weeks of the season. And then when you throw in Ariza, when Ariza comes back, he's somebody that's going to be demanding minutes and somebody that's going to be needed to guard some of these wing positions, And then you got, like I said, Kendrick Nunn's going to be somebody that needs the ball in his hands that can be a playmaker that can go get you, 12, 14 points a night. That maybe when these older guys take, we'll call it a night off, or they're maybe we'll call it, a little rusty, a little, they didn't get their morning coffee, something like that. We'll call it like that. We'll see. Really, I think we got to get there to that point of playing good basketball, but we can't get there too late. And that's like kind of in the game situations too. We get down by 18 points. They're not the young stars they used to be where they can go on a 24-0 run. I know we've done it, but they can't expect that every night. They're not in their early MVP days, and I know some of them put up numbers that are ridiculous, but they're not going to be able to do that for that long of a before an ankle rolls, before a knee starts swelling, and all that stuff is going to matter. And I know we say we're an older team, but some of the younger guys are going to need to step up. THT is going to need to play, going to have to win us a playoff game one of these times. That young core, I look at it as the Celtics back in the day when we played the Lakers. Who won the game for them? It was a young Nate Robinson, and it was a young Big Baby Davis. That young core with those veterans was able to go in and take a game just because their effort, their quickness, that's going to matter when the thing starts happening,
Yeah, for sure.
And you talk about the young core. I want to mention Austin Reeves too. I feel like that can be a player that can really be something for the Lakers. When he goes, he doesn't just take advantage of the minutes. He takes advantage of the seconds that he's there on the court. Yeah. The littlest things, the heart, the hustle, fighting out a rebound, or saving a ball from going out of bounds. Those are plays that hype up your bench. Those are plays that hype up the players on the floor. So it's usually the Lakers only having one young player. This year, they have the privilege of having two. They have THT, who is also been doing a lot of dirty work with trying to guard the big players last night. Like, he was defending Jason Tatum a couple of times too, and that's a tough task because Tatum was just dropping buckets all night long. And you saw him missing some action in that third quarter where the Celtics really needed him most. But THT taking care of the business, and he's going to have to eat up some minutes as well. We've been talking about this team being very much older, but Reeves, this is a player that takes advantage of every moment of it being on the floor.
Yeah, and I hope they take his development seriously. I know the Lakers have had a reputation of the last few years, whether it be like Lonzo or D'Angelo Russell or Julius Randle or even Kyle Kuzma in Washington, letting them go a little too soon.
Ingram as well.
Yeah, and I know people were really bummed out about losing Caruso. I know I was. And I think if anything positive can come out of the Caruso fiasco and how well he's playing in Chicago is that the Lakers should learn, like, not to let go of players like that. Just like let them develop and see what they can turn into, because Caruso's going to win either most improved player of the year, or he's going to make an all defensive team in Chicago. And he could have easily done that with the Lakers.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. We, if you look around the league, we've put star players on multiple teams and role players on multiple teams. And, Reeves, I think, is a player that we need an IQ player. We need somebody that can, maybe he's not the most athletic, maybe he's not the most, the fastest or the strongest, but when he looks at the game, he can see different things. He knows what to do, put himself in position where, and that's one thing LeBron usually has one player, that maybe you're like, Deladova back in the day, Mike Miller in Miami, all those players, are decent NBA players, but paired with the IQ of Bron and to do what Bron tells you to do. And I know you see all those videos back in the day of Kobe being a court general, telling everybody, speaking to Gasol in Spanish, like that's, those things are there. Those players are special players. So learn from them, do what they tell you. And I think that was part of Kuzma. When he did do what Bron said, Kuzma had great games, and you can tell Kuzma wanted to take that next step. But when you're playing with Bron, you have to understand, you're either going to take the money and go somewhere else and develop and be a star, or if you're going to want to win and want to, I think that's what it really takes. Kyrie wanted to be a bigger star, and he left Bron. And look how that ended up turning out. You have some players that don't want to be with LeBron, and they end up doing a little bit better here and there. But for the most part, Bron's going to put you in a good situation. Bron wants to win. It's not like he doesn't want to win. He's not going to do you dirty. He needs everybody to, that's why he hand selects the team, because he knows he has a clock that's ticking, and he wants to everybody knows what that mission is. He wants to tie or pass Michael. So, he has these players that are young. They have to listen to LeBron. If they want to see minutes, they want to see, like Caruso. Caruso was able to do what Bron said, and the Lakers didn't give him that contract, but look at where he's at now. He's going to be, like you said, most likely first team defense in the NBA, or going to be the most improved player. And that right there is going to pay you off eventually. That next contract, now you're really sitting at the table, and now you're picking and choosing. Look at last year when we brought in a Montrezl Harrell. I think he didn't take that role in, and he kind of fought with it. And now the year ago when he was with the Clippers, they were talking about, I think he won six man of the year almost.
Yeah.
And so that's a thing where you agree to come into the Lake Show, you have to know what your role is. And for the Lakers to succeed, everybody has to do their role. And that's all. I think the minimum is to do your role. And if you have better games, cool. But if everybody does their thing, we'll be good.
Yeah, well said.
I think at the end of the day is going to be LeBron as somewhat of a coach, player, and maybe even down the line we see him as a general manager for a future NBA team, because the way he crafts these players and just the way he puts teams together is definitely remarkable, back to his Cleveland days, his Miami days, and now with the Lakers. So you said it well, both you guys. Lakers just needing the effort, just needing to get some stops, listen to LeBron, and really use the youth to be able to incorporate them in minutes, allow a little bit of the veterans to be able to sit back, kind of demand the team, just kind of command the whole entire team as the captain, and just try to direct their troops to the right direction. But we're going to go ahead and step aside. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the Clippers and what type of season they're having. It's very different than the Lakers and their problems that they're having. But if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, a source of your SoCal sports news. We'll be right back.
This is Kyra Boncho Smith, hip-hop artist and men's basketball player, and you're watching Sideline Sports Podcast.
And we're bringing you second half action of Sideline Sports Podcast. Once again, I am the host, Alex Naveja. Where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, a source of your SoCal sports news via Sideline Sports Media. Once again, on the bottom screen, that is Mark Vargas, NCAA football, NFL football, and combat sports, along with NBA Insider. And on my left-hand side, that is J.C. de Leon from Ethos Sports and Ethos Lakers. Everything you need to know about the Lakers, JC's got it. We'll put his social media handles down in the description below, along with our social media handles down in the description below. And make sure to follow Sideline Sports Podcast so you guys can stay up to date with all SoCal sports. And we'll have all of the big news coming up. Of course, nothing going on with MLB with the lockouts going on. But let's talk about the Clippers. The first half, we were talking about the Lakers and what they need and what's been going on. The Clippers is a different story now. I know the Clippers, that was a team that every year could be in the mix to be up there, maybe top 3, top 4 in the Western Conference, but that's not even the case over there for the Clippers, and they're neck and neck with the Lakers in that 5th seed. But Mark, I mean, what's going on with the Clips right now? I mean, short-handed with a big star. What's going on?
I think that's exactly what you just said. With the fact that they don't have their second star. I mean, the way the NBA is set up is most teams have one star. The teams that don't are at the bottom. The teams that have one are in the middle of the pack, and the teams that have 2 or more are in the top. And I think for the Clip show, the Clips whole, everything is gonna fall down to how Kawhi comes back. If Kawhi comes back and takes a month to get into things, then maybe if they are hanging around, then yeah, they can squeeze in that playing game. But you can't ask more from PG. PG's playing probably his best basketball since maybe the Indiana days. Really. I would say you could ask a little bit more out of Zubac. Maybe you can ask a little bit more. I mean, the other night, Morris basically what 4, 5, 6 3-pointers, I think it was. Like that. Those, yeah, are gonna come in handy. But I think you just as the Clipper fans, I'm not a Clipper fan, but as somebody that knows how that success is gonna work is as long as they can stay around, as long as they can stay relevant, I think that's a big win for them. If they can stay relevant for Kawhi to at least give them an opportunity to make a run, that's all you can ask for. But it's just there's not really much you can say right now until Kawhi comes back. Kawhi comes back, and they can turn some heads. Kawhi can come back, play. Look how he was last year pre-injury, and they're gonna cause damage. They will cause damage. If PG, that's gonna still be a thing. Is PG in the playoffs? Is that gonna be? Is he gonna get in his own head again? But I think PG would maybe could go on a dominant playoff run if this is he gets the keys and Kawhi is kind of facilitating and kind of working his way in by the first round, second round. That might be a scary Clipper team. So I'm not doubting them. I know better now since last year with the Lakers, looking at that Phoenix team, we thought we were going to be the big bully and we were going to be able to turn it on at the end of the year. Until we're eliminated or until we're holding that championship, I think anybody can be a real contender in this league.
Yeah, I think it all does depend on Kawhi. I think looking at the playoff standings now, I think Dallas Denver might go up a couple paces, but I don't think it's a stretch for the Clippers to make the playoffs. But the thing with Kawhi is interesting because I remember it being diagnosed as a partially torn ACL, but he's the guy who sat out an entire season in San Antonio with what some doctors said was like a bruised knee.
Mm-hmm.
And other doctors said it was more serious than that. So he's somebody who does take his health very seriously, and he does take every precaution. And I wouldn't be surprised, partially torn ACL or fully torn ACL or not, I wouldn't be surprised if he does sit out the entire year. Even though players do tend to come back from ACLs much faster. Nothing would surprise me with Kawhi, since as nobody really knows anything about him. He could come back tomorrow, and I don't think that would surprise me. Or he could sit out the entire season, and I don't think that would surprise me either.
You can say this situation, say the Clippers are a 9th to 10th, spot, maybe, and something bad happens, does he even think about coming back? Do you even want him coming back?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where a month, maybe a month to 3 months away, or really 2 months away to really knowing anything of how anything's going to look like. So right now, if you're a Clipper fan, just kind of keep cheering on PG-13, hopefully he does his thing. And
yeah, and there are things to really be happy about, and like the Clippers are doing really well. One of the most accurate 3-point shooters in the league, believe it or not, is not any of the Curry brothers or like Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson in Miami. It's Marcus Morris. He's one of the more accurate 3-point shooters in the league this season. Reggie Jackson, I know he was playing for a big contract at the end of last season, didn't exactly get the big contract he was looking for, and so he's just basically playing into another contract year. He's playing really well. Zubats always plays pretty well. So yeah, I think that there's things for the Clippers fans to be happy about and rest their laurels on.
Not having Kawhi, I think, is a big thing for the Clippers because that is such a huge superstar. And this is a guy that really does carry the team, Mr. Clutch, and comes up in the big moments and one of the best closers in the game to come in the fourth and just finish up the whole entire game. But if you guys take a look at the roster, this team is just chock full of talent. Remember, Eric Bledsoe is still in there. Nicholas Batum is still there too. One player that really impresses me with how quick he is and his ball handling is Terrence Mann. Terrence Mann was having his way against the Lakers, and this is a very underrated guard in the NBA. Terrence Mann he's just one of a big factor for the Clippers offense. And who can forget about Luke Kennard? He finished the Lakers with the final 2 3-pointers, finished them, and got the job done against the Lake Show. So the Clippers, they have a lot of guys. They have a lot of weapons. PG right now having to carry the team on his back. And, that's a tough job for him to do. But there's guys in this roster that can very much help him out. And who can forget about Serge Ibaka that can really battle it out in the paint and periodically shoot the 3-ball. I feel like everybody in the Clippers could shoot the 3-point shot. And especially with Ty Lue as the head coach with that system that he really implements. And I like it. I know I say this in every podcast, but I like the system that the coaching staff has incorporated with passing the ball around, sharing the sugar behind the perimeter. Maybe you work into the paint, give it back to a guy at the 3-point line, comes in with the 3, bang. I like the system that the Clippers have and the roster that they have. I think they are capable of – they're always capable of going for a big run. How it goes in the postseason, different.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of talked about it earlier with we need that young guy to have a big playoff moment. Terrence Mann basically helped eliminate the Dallas Mavericks last year. Without Terrence Mann, the Dallas Mavericks are beating the Clippers in the playoffs, and they don't even get that run that they did. So I mean, or maybe it wasn't. I think what was the series he had? I don't know if it was the Mavericks or the Utah the Utah series, but Terrence Mann was playing great basketball throughout the playoffs last year. I mean, and that's somebody that he can continue to, if you're a Clipper fan, like he can develop into a third option, and I think that's kind of where he's developing at, where he's at right now. And who knows? Like it's a big thing. Who knows? And I think even the locker room right now, I think they might be benefiting from without having Kawhi there every day. Because, there's a lot of more spotlight. There's a lot of more eyes on that team when Kawhi is there. And, some people don't do well with that. And some people can't find themselves with all the spotlight on. So I think with Kawhi stepping back a little bit, it's allowing everybody else to step up. And I think what has the Clippers' problem been? It's been that locker room. It's been, them not being able to get to that point, to get over that hump. It has been Kawhi on holding everybody accountable. And, Kawhi's not the vocal guy that, some players are. So I think this team maybe finding themselves through this adversity can be something that can be beneficial for them come playoffs, come, second half of the season where they got to go on a, make a couple runs, win 7 straight or 6 straight a couple times. I think that's what this whole thing is. This is how if the Clippers are going to be, taken seriously, we will learn throughout this period of without Kawhi how they manage themselves. Because the Lakers have, done it before without AD, without Bron. They've had to man shit. So, it's one of those things where you're going to have to see what the Clippers are all about right now.
Yeah, and I think in the end they'll be a fairly formidable team. I think not necessarily a team that they'll make an interesting series out of the first round of the playoffs, and if they can get past it, an interesting round of the second. But that's probably about as far as they'll go, with or without Kawhi. I think even if Kawhi comes back, you expect to see a little level of rust on him, and conditioning with lower leg injuries is always an issue when they come back. And so, yeah, and I think a playoff team will be a successful season for this Clippers team.
And I think if they can make it to the postseason and if they can at least make a serious run this year and maybe come close to even just a Western Conference final for them, I think that would be a winning year for them as well. And just try to come close to that NBA Finals appearance, making the first one ever in franchise history. I think that would be huge for the Clippers as well. But not going to be possible unless they have their leader, Kawhi Leonard, the way this guy plays, the way he carries himself, and just having that 1-2 punch of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. That's a tough team to try to defend as a visiting team and trying to beat the Clippers. But right now, they are a little bit more manageable without Kawhi Leonard. But next 5 games, they've got a tough stretch tonight, taking care of business against Boston. They have to play against Phoenix on Monday. Then they have to play against the Jazz next week on Wednesday at the Jazz. So they've got quite the task coming up for the Clippers, and they are going to be put to the test every game moving forward. So let's just see how they do. I mean, until that All-Star break, I think that All-Star break, they'll finally get a sigh of relief. Like, all right, time is on our side. Kawhi is able to, he's getting more rest. And hopefully, maybe those are some step forwards for the organization.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I got a question, JC. What sleeper team or what team has been, outside the Lakers, outside the Clippers we just talked about, who's kind of been surprising you, or who do you think maybe is looking like a team that's going to be, basically making a run this year?
I mean, out in the West, taking a look at the playoff standing, Minnesota, I think they haven't played great, but like it's to think of them, they haven't played pretty great. And then you look at the standings, they're like, oh, they're right in the mix. Portland has been playing worse than people thought. I think Dallas and Memphis are probably two of my bigger surprises. I don't know if Dallas is probably playing a little bit worse than people thought, but Memphis coming right out of the gate in the 4 seed right now. John Morant's been playing super well this season, and he's coming out of that draft. I knew everybody was Zion was the obvious pick. No matter what team had him, they had to go with Zion, even though I was concerned about his weight and how well they were going to do. I knew that the best player out of that draft was going to be John Morant, and he's playing really well out there in Memphis.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, if you just look at being on the court, Zion hasn't been on the court, and you can say, yeah, New Orleans hasn't done their job either. We're trying to help develop or help surround him. I know they try to throw the baby Lakers with them, and that's to me, that's not getting enough done. You need somebody who can be, I look at it as, I think, unfortunately, Zion, I think he has to fall into that same type of role as a Zach Randolph, where you're going to need somebody that controls the ball, Mike Conley, that can be a court general, you don't allow Zion to be a bully, allow Zion to do what he does down low, but where Zion's not being asked to just carry the whole team. Can he? Yes. But I think that's going to be for him to succeed. He has to be put with maybe a team that I think he will look great if you can get him in Charlotte. Throw him with LaMelo. If you're talking about a young up-and-coming team, LaMelo Ball, I think it was Miles Bridges or Michael Bridges.
Miles Bridges in Charlotte, yeah.
Yeah, you could look at that team right there. Imagine Zion there. That's something that's, whoa. That you're talking about one of the better teams in the league at that point. Mismatch-wise, like that on a nightly basis, they can beat anybody if you look at that. But I think this week, the news of Indiana basically and selling is going to be huge. With those 3 players, they can end up, Sabonis. If Sabonis can end up with a team that, maybe he ends up with Dallas. Maybe he ends up with, we'll see. Miles Turner. I think Miles Turner can be phenomenal on a team that he doesn't have to be. Allow him just to play defense all night.
Yeah, earlier talked about how you wouldn't necessarily want to get rid of Reeves or THT, and I feel like if there was a good enough package for those 2 players, letting them go could be worth it if he can bring back a Miles Turner or a Sabonis. My preference of those 2 would be a Miles Turner, just because there's the wishy-washy situation with the Lakers at center. I think Reeves or THT in a package of like Bazemore and DeAndre Jordan would probably get it done for Miles Turner, and that'd be a fair trade. That'd be worth kind of letting go of Austin Reeves a little early.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Look at Kuzma. How many times have we said, "Oh, we want to hold on to Kuz. We want," and at the end of the day, he walked away. I think he was in that deal to Washington, but I
Well, yeah,
mean,
they ended up not trading him too soon, so that was good because they ended up getting Russell Westbrook, whose style I'm still getting used to. I'm not I've never really been a Russell Westbrook fan. It's taken me a lot of getting used to the way he plays and how reckless he plays, but I'm getting there. I'm getting used to it.
I think it's going to be a fun NBA season, just like this year's football season. There's a lot of teams just kind of in the mix.
Yeah,
And I think in the NBA, I think we saw last year in the playoffs with the Knicks and the Hawks, like the young game is here. I know we go back to KD, we go back to Chris Paul, Braun, and some of these older guys that have been there, done that. But these young cats are not. They are coming for the throat. They ain't playing, and they could put up numbers. That's
yeah.
one thing. It's gonna be. They will go for a big game this year.
It's weird how quickly that happens. Like I remember a couple years ago, just kind of asking myself, like, am I even gonna like basketball once LeBron retires? There's just not going to be anybody as good. But like, there's John Morant, there's uh, Donovan Mitchell. There's a lot of players coming up, and yeah, I think the game's going to be in good hands.
I think when Braun's gone, I think the Lakers put all their marbles and you bring Jason Tatum to the Lakers.
Yeah,
I think that's the next move. I think that's the post Braun. And, you kind of sit back and see where AD's at. And if you can bring a Tatum and a little bit of an older AD, I think that's a possibility that, I mean, look at I think the franchise or the salary is going to only go up so much. So, I mean, we might be picking and choosing who we want in a couple years. And I mean,
yeah.
we're going to get one of these young cats. The Lakers, the Lakers have that name again, where I know there was a few years where players weren't wanting to play in LA. And I think with the arrival with the Rams again and the Chargers, LA is a place to be. And, look at
Yeah.
SC with the hire Lincoln Riley. LA is gonna be buzzing. And if you're
Yeah, and I think as an unfortunate situation as it was losing Kobe Bryant, I think there are players like Jason Tatum and DeMar DeRozan was almost a Laker this year. I think there are players that want to bring championships to the Lakers and want to do it in honor of Kobe.
That's what it was. Really, I think players grew up watching Shaq, grew up watching Kobe, and part of that Kobe dominating and all those players dominating was because they grew up watching Magic, grew up watching Worthy, Kareem do their thing. So I mean, it's a Lakers tradition, and that's why we're up there with the Celtics. We're the best franchise in almost in any sport. So there is so much history there, and there's so much you know an aura around the Lakers that I don't think there's we don't go through phases like we did the last couple years. We don't do that. So
Yeah.
we'll be in good hands.
And to go off of what you were saying, Mark, just as far as those losing years for the Lakers, that's a surprise. That's a rarity for the Lakers. And what you were talking about earlier, just the Lakers having these generational players with Jerry West, and you have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, James Worthy, and then you move up to a different generation with a young Kobe. He had Robert Horry. He had his squad of players with Shaq coming in, and once those players, then when they had made their moves, then Kobe still stuck around. Then future players like Paul Gasol came in, D Fish was there with the whole entire way, and having another young generation of players coming in as well. When you bringing in the Jordan Clarksons, the Julius Randles, and it's just a new wave of generations of players that are coming in. And now it's like they were talking about it yesterday in the broadcast in TNT. They were talking about Kobe just being one of those generational players for the Tatums, for the Devin Bookers, that they grew up watching the Kobe Bryants. And these are just generational players. So as Kobe, LeBron, Chris Paul, those type of players, they're going to move forward when they return. That's going to leave the spot for the Devin Bookers, for the Jason Tatums, for them to be the next generational players. Then there's going to be the young generation watching them. And it's just a never-ending cycle when it comes down to these big-time NBA players.
Think about how many kids right now that grew up watching Steph Curry. I think when you talk about generational players, impactful players, that's why, people want to say Steph was whatever. No. Steph changed the game of basketball. There's going to be kids. You look at Trae Young. Trae Young's, baby Steph right there. Just, that the way he plays is literally is allowed because of Steph Curry. When Kobe was going through it in the early, mid 2000s, you weren't shooting all these 3-pointers a game. You're losing those games. I remember a couple of teams where early on where they would say, "Oh, you live and die by the three." You don't say that anymore. It's everybody's a 3-point shooting team. It's how effective you are and if you can surround yourself with shooters. But yeah, man, the game's always progressing and it's going to be in good hands for many years to come.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just can't wait for the NBA to be growing. This game is always changing every year. Just like Mark said, everybody's a 3-point shooting team. You need to have a 3-point game. If you don't, you're going to lose. You're not going to win a championship, just not the winning ways. But that's all the time we have left here on Sideline Sports Podcast. We thank you all so much for tuning into this one. If you like this episode, please give it a thumbs up. Also, comment down below who is your NBA team, who has been your surprising factor this year, and we want to hear why you think that's a surprising factor. And of course, while you're down there, hit the subscribe button down below, folks. We are very close to subscriber number 350. The road to 400, it is already happening, and we need all of you guys' help to get us there. And of course, while you guys are down there in the description box as well, follow Sideline Sports Podcast and all of our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We will keep you guys up to date with everything SoCal sports, and we're going to bring great guests and even some surprise guests like J.C. De Leon. I know Mark's got some great surprises coming up for the Center Lock show tomorrow and moving forward. And there's still some surprises we have in our back pocket as well. And I know Jose has a surprise in his back pocket. Not going to leak a lot of it. But J.C. De Leon, thank you so much for coming out to the podcast, man. Really appreciate it, coming from Sports Ethos Lakers Ethos.
Yeah, man. I always enjoy it. Thanks for having me on.
And in the bottom screen right there, host of Center Lock Show, Mark Vargas, NBA Insider, NCAA football, NFL, combat sports insider. Never want to sleep on what Mark's got going on. So, Mark, we'll see you tomorrow, man. Can't wait to hear all about what's coming up for Center Locked.
Yeah, man, we're gonna have a good episode tomorrow, and I just want to throw in there, hey, big fight week this Saturday. UFC is gonna be going down. You got Oliveira versus Poirier. It's a big title fight. You got a couple undercard on the main card. There's another 2 title fights as well. So I mean, if you're looking for some sports Saturday night, check it out. UFC. It's gonna be a good night to watch some. Kick back, throw on some, get the carne asada going. It'll be a good one.
It's always a good reason to have carne asada on the grill, man. So any reason's a good reason to bring it up. But I'm Alex Naveja from Sideline Sports Podcast, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, a source of your SoCal sports via Sideline Sports Media. Have a good night, everybody, and enjoy the NBA season and, of course, the bowl games.